Switzerland, the only country in Europe where salaries for software engineers reach American levels, where a junior engineer, even outside of big tech companies, can make six figures straight out of college, where big tech engineers, on the other hand, can make 200, 300, up to more than 500K dollars per year as they do in California or New York. It's the place in Europe with the highest salaries for tech folks, with a lot of exciting opportunities, with very high quality of life, with contained taxes, and is also a place where me myself have spent more than 4 years living and working in Zurich, Switzerland. In today's video, we're going to dive deep into every aspect of working and living in Switzerland as a software engineer. I am Nicola Madia. I'm a software engineer based in Zurich, Switzerland. I come from Italy originally. I lived throughout various countries in Europe, including Germany, Spain, as well as Italy and Switzerland, of course, and I've traveled all over the continent and spent a lot of time in Central Eastern Europe. I have a newsletter called The European Engineer, theeuropeanengineer.com, as well as a job board for top tech jobs in Europe called Euro Top Tech Jobs. I am also active on LinkedIn, where I have over 40,000 followers and where I post daily about tech careers in Europe. Now, let's start with the basics. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, salaries in Switzerland are the highest in Europe, not just for software engineers, but for all professionals, really. And let's dive deeper into that. So as a software engineer, what you can expect to make in a city like Zurich, for example, which is the city with the most jobs for software folks in Switzerland, alongside other smaller cities like Bern, Lucerne, Lausanne, or Lugano, although Lugano has much lower salaries. In Zurich, you can expect to make between 80 to 110, 120K Swiss francs, which is roughly Europe, as an entry-level software engineer outside of big tech companies. Big tech companies, for those who are not familiar with the term, are companies that pay top-of-the-range market, usually large big tech American companies such as Google, Meta, Amazon, but also smaller companies, for example, like GitLab, GitHub, Datadog. I consider all these companies as big tech companies, and basically it's top paying tech companies usually working at scale. And well, among the other top paying companies, I would also include high frequency trading companies and high paying remote startups. But as I mentioned, in Switzerland, basically the salary range for the entry level outside of big tech is already quite high. You can often get 100K Swiss francs for a normal company straight out of college. You can also get 80K. This is not uncommon. It's a bit on the lower end, but it's also possible. As a big tech engineer, you can make, on the other hand, more than 150,000 francs straight out of school in total compensation in several big tech companies. And in many cases, you can also make more than that. You can make more than 170, 180K even per year. Then, if you are a mid-level engineer, if you're working for regular local companies, you can expect to make around maybe 110, 120K per year, or 100 also in the worst cases. Whereas in big tech, you can start making between 180 and 250 in some cases. I would say this could be a broad range. And if you're senior, you can expect to make more than 130K per year in regular companies and more than 250K per year if you're working in big tech. If you're curious about more detailed numbers, you can check Levels FYI for salaries in big tech companies in Zurich, or you can also check my job board, which also reports salary levels in addition to saving rates. So basically, what you would be able to save to keep in your bank account at the end of the year after taxes and cost of living, and you can select the lifestyle you would like to have such that you deduct the right cost of living in your case. This is from my job board. Now, after we have talked about salaries, we need to get some other informations, right? So let's get information about taxes. Taxes in Switzerland are pretty good generally. They're not super high. You can expect to pay between 20 and 40% tax total, including Social Security. social security, meaning also pension, so money that you will receive at the end of your career in pension, or even in early withdrawal, which are in some cases allowed in Switzerland as well. And also, for example, healthcare emergencies, unemployment insurance in case you get laid off or you lose your job, then you also have a stipend for a few years until you find a new job. So basically, these taxes that you pay in Switzerland are not just lost, but some of them are repurposed to pension and unemployment insurance or accident insurance. So they are good taxes in a way, and they're also not so high. For example, on a salary of 100k Swiss francs, you can expect to get per month net around 6.5 thousand francs per month. And in my last job, I worked in several companies, and my last job in Zurich was with Oracle, and I was making around 200,000 francs per year. And the tax rate for this level of salary is 30% roughly. Again, not all of that is lost. Some of it is for pension, some of it is for other kinds of insurances. So this gives you an idea. It is much better than some other Western countries like Germany, France, or Italy, but it is worse maybe than working as a contractor or under certain type of contracts in other countries in Central and Eastern Europe. It is quite similar to, for example, Poland, where to which I dedicated my last video on the channel. So here you have the salary part and the taxes. Both of them are generally quite good. Salaries are very high, the highest in Europe, in fact, and taxes are also on the lower hand in Europe. And also, in addition to that, they are invested quite well. Some of it goes to pension, some of it goes to various insurances. And the infrastructure generally works pretty well. So the roads are perfect, the nature is pristine and very well kept. So you don't feel bad about the tax money that you spend. Note that if you go to higher levels of income, for example, 300, 400 or 500K, then your taxes starts to raise quite significantly, and you can quite easily reach 40%. If your goal is to work as a big tech engineer in Zurich for the long term, then you will eventually, if your career progresses and you get promoted several times, you will reach quite high level of taxation, over 40%. So your taxes can become quite high if you become really high earner. But there are also ways to optimize that, I would say. And for example, you can have some pension tricks that I will not dive deeper in the video, and invest some of your income in some pension fund and reduce this way your taxable income, and in the end up paying a bit less than that, but still for high income you pay high taxes generally in Switzerland. And for example, compared to the US, at the lower income levels, actually you pay less taxes in Switzerland than in the US, like below 200K more or less. But after 200K of income, you start to pay less taxes in the US in certain states like Washington State or Texas, where you don't have state tax, but just the other tax. And in Switzerland, you start to pay more taxes. So for incomes below 200K, you pay less taxes in Switzerland than in the US. For income higher than that, and especially for income after 500K or 400K, you will pay less taxes in the US, in the right states, in particular Washington State, Texas, and Florida, for example, states with no state income tax. Health insurance in Switzerland is semi-private, meaning that you are forced to pay it, but it's private technically. So it is not included in your taxes. You pay on the side, and it's usually around between 3, 4, and 5, 600 francs per month. And this basically means that you can access the healthcare, which is very high quality in Switzerland, almost for free. So depending on exactly how much you pay for your health insurance, which health insurance you choose, if you choose one that is cheaper, you will have to pay for your visits up until a certain threshold, usually 2,000-3,000 francs per year. And if you choose a more expensive one, like 500 francs per month or more, usually everything you do is kind of free. maybe you just pay a small percentage, like 10% of your healthcare costs. Healthcare costs are very high otherwise in Switzerland. So if you don't go through the insurance, they tend to be very high. But as a rule of thumb, you can, in my opinion, take into account 500 francs per month for health insurance, and then healthcare is basically free. This is usually what I've done in the last couple of years. Now, talking about healthcare costs, let's start to explore a very important topic of working and living in Switzerland, which is the cost of living. Cost of living in Switzerland is very, very high. In particular, Zurich is oftentimes ranked as the most expensive city in the world, which means that your life here will have a very high cost. So Switzerland as a country for software engineers is very different proposition to some other countries that I mentioned in my previous videos, for example, Poland, Romania, or Serbia, countries where I mentioned people have very high purchasing power because the cost of living is quite low compared to their salary. In Switzerland, depending on your salary, your purchasing power can vary greatly because the cost of living is extremely high. To give you an example, rent, which is not the most expensive thing, but it's quite hard to find new flats. I don't know how to price it. Like, it's not the most expensive, but to find things that are not expensive is actually not easy. So it can become expensive because of that. But technically, for a studio flat, you can expect to pay between 1,600 to even 3,000 francs per month. I would say with 2,000 francs per month, you can find a flat in Zurich, even in a central location. And this is more or less the price for housing. Then everything that requires human labor, it is super expensive. So if you need like a cleaning lady or a babysitter or a private tutor or maybe a coach for tennis classes, anything like this is going to be quite pricey because, just to survive in Zurich, you kind of need at least 3,000 francs per month. So even Uber Eats delivery guys usually make more than 4K per month. There are students that manage to live with less than that, but usually they get special deals on rent, like some kind of help from the state and some other discounts. You can pay maybe 2,500 per month to live in a city like Zurich. But other than that, if you're a normal person, it's quite hard over the course of a year to spend less than 3.5, 4K per month, even if you are just living with other people maybe and so on. Also, eating out and going out in general is very expensive. It is one of the most expensive, if not the most expensive places where I've ever gone out to. And you can expect to pay, like, oftentimes when I go out just for a pizza and a beer, for example, and I don't know, maybe with a side dish or a dessert, I can easily pay like 50 francs. It's not uncommon to pay more than 20 francs for just a kebab. And delivery options also are not cheap. So you need to expect to spend quite a bit if you are living in Zurich. The cost will depend a lot on your lifestyle because given that a lot of things are expensive, being frugal will have a big difference between being like more luxurious. I have friends that spend maybe like 4,000 francs per month or even less, especially people, for example, that work at Google where they have the food there. They can spend less than 4,000 francs per month, especially if they don't do much outside of work. Maybe they are here for a few years to save up some money, or they are frugal in nature. Then they can spend less than 4,000. I have also friends that spend more than 8,000 per month. Maybe they go out often. They go to cocktail bars where each cocktail costs more than 20 francs. And then it's quite easy, to stack up big spending over the course of a month. I think a range for most people, developers tend to be more on the frugal side, but I would say if you are someone that if you meet 100 people, you are like 50 spender, like not spending more than most or not spending less than most, you will probably need around 5K per month to live just by yourself. And by the way, this includes also maybe shopping, assuming you do just a little bit of it, or maybe some travels. It's also not too hard to spend more than 6K per month. I would say you don't need to do a very luxurious lifestyle to spend more than that in Zurich. It's roughly the equivalent, depending on which other cities you know, but you can actually use Numbeo cost of living comparison, and you can find how much you could spend in Zurich based on how much you're spending in your current city. It is somewhat accurate. Then, of course, it depends on what you like to spend money on, but this can give you an idea. Before we go on to talking about the cost of having a family in Zurich, let me add another point to the big tech one. If your goal is to work for a big tech company in Europe, which is a good goal, because if you work in big tech, you have the advantage of working with great engineers, with the great tech. It's a great career move. You can grow a lot and learn a lot, and it's also more fun, in my opinion, than working in some bank or local company. Then it's much better to keep your options open and to target companies across countries in Europe and to be a bit flexible on location. And if you don't want to be too flexible, I wouldn't pick Zurich because it's very hard to get a big tech job here. This was my goal, kind of, and I struggled a lot to get one because, as I mentioned, there is not so much. But if you target other cities, for example, Warsaw or London or Dublin or Madrid, you're going to have a way easier time getting a big tech job. If you target all of them and even everywhere in Europe, you're going to have a much easier time. You just need to do your interview prep, about which I will talk also in the future on the channel. So if you're curious, subscribe. And it's going to be much easier. If you're trying to enter big tech in Europe, I would recommend my job board, Euro Top Tech Jobs, where basically I'm tracking all the big tech jobs in Europe and as well as their salary and their saving rate that they would allow. So I think it's a very good way. I built this exactly to solve this problem, being an engineer who wants to work in big tech or top paying companies, also in finance, in Europe, and have all these jobs regularly updated all in one place, as well as also fully remote jobs that you can do anywhere in Europe and earning six figures. It also includes private guides on perfecting your CV, your LinkedIn, your career strategy and application strategy. So basically guides that should help you land these jobs. With the cost of kids, I will not go too much into detail. I will leave some links in the comments, in the description of the video, such that you can dive a bit deeper, but I don't want this video to be too long. So I will just briefly mention that you have kids in the kindergarten, it costs you 3K per month for each kid. So that adds up quite a lot. If you want to have a family, in my opinion, Zurich is a bit less attractive, at least financially, than if you are single. And now let's move to the last topic of the video, which is kind of connected to what I just mentioned regarding kids. And that is the attractiveness of Zurich and Switzerland for software engineers in 2025, which, in my opinion, as someone who has lived here for many years and has studied and lived abroad in Europe as well, it is less than it used to be. So I think Zurich nowadays is a bit less appealing for software engineers than it was in the past, with a few exceptions. I think if you are a top engineers and you want to work with companies like OpenAI or Google Research or Meta Research, Zurich is the best location, not only in Europe, but I think one of the best in the world. But for all the other developers, which is most, I think 99.99% of people in IT, then I don't think it's the best option, except maybe if you are early in your career and you want a fast way to stack up some cash, then it can be a good place. But other than that, I don't know. Because as I mentioned in the other videos on this channel, there is a bit of a trend of salaries for IT people being equalized globally. So the salaries in high cost location, like in the US and California and in Switzerland, haven't been rising all that much as they have been in emerging markets like India or Eastern Europe. This is because the output is roughly the same, and companies can get top people from everywhere in the world. So they would rather pay 100K in India to get a very top-notch engineer than pay maybe 200K in California to get just someone who is just a good engineer. But the cost of living don't move with the tech salaries, because cost of living are influenced by thousands of other factors. So the Indian developers making 100K will be living like a king in India, basically, whereas the developer in California making 200K is not going to live at all like a king. And this applies to Switzerland as well. As I mentioned, if you work outside of big tech, making 100 to 140K doesn't really make you rich at all in Zurich. It's only good if you want to save up some money or travel a little bit around the continent. Then it's a very good move. But you are not rich at all, basically. If you work in big tech, it's better. It's much better, actually. But it's much more competitive to get into big tech than getting into big tech elsewhere in Europe. And all in all, also the fact that your taxes will rise if you are in big tech and you climb the ladder, I think makes it also a little bit less attractive, because let's think about it. If you're making 500K and half of it almost goes to taxes, and then you need to spend like a lot of money on your family, on kids, for example. If you're making 500K, likely you are late stage in your career. Then if you run the math, it's also not that great of a deal unless you like living in Switzerland, which is also something worth mentioning, because Switzerland also has some unique features as a country to live in, like all the countries do. And it can be an attractive place to live in, regardless of the salaries and costs and taxes, or regardless of the numbers. It can be an attractive place to live if you value certain things that you can find easily in Switzerland, such as great nature, convenience with traveling, with a great airport at the center of Europe, as well as high safety. It's a very safe place, safest in Western Europe. Having a stable and reliable government, having a great infrastructure, and all these things, especially in these confusing times with the war in Ukraine and all these things with Trump, Switzerland is a pretty stable place. So if you want to be unbothered and have a chill and relaxed life, Switzerland is a good place. On the other hand, it's not the best place if you want to have fun, socialize a lot. In my opinion, from this perspective, from what I've seen, is not optimal. I know a lot of expats that complain a little bit about the social life, the dating life, or the nightlife, or things like this. It's a place where restaurants oftentimes close at 9:30 or 10 during the week. So it's not really a lot going on during the week, I would say, in the city of Zurich. And in the weekend, it's also not really a big city. In the end, it's a 400,000 inhabitant city. So it's not a big city, and you shouldn't expect to be living in one. So all in all, I would say Switzerland is an amazing country. Zurich is a great city to live in Europe as a software engineer. It can be incredible if you're early in your career and you want to save some money, gain some experience, travel a bit around Europe and figure out where to go next. It can also be an excellent place if you want to raise your family here, especially if you're making enough money, because family costs can get quite high. But if you are successful, and maybe if you are in big tech, then you can also afford having a family here and having a very good quality of life as well. So all in all, really, I have nothing bad to say about Switzerland. In my opinion, I see the move going from more to be more in lower cost countries while having a high compensation in US dollars or euro as an IT, and doing a sort of geo arbitrage. That for me, it seems to be the trend going forward for the next decade. But it can still really be a very interesting place to be based in. And if you want to work with companies like OpenAI and work at the forefront of LLM and all that kind of stuff, Switzerland and Zurich is really excellent as well. Let me know what you think. Do you still like Zurich? Are you planning to move there? Or are you already living here? How do you like it? Let me know in the comments. Check out all the links in the description, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.